Welcome back, aspirants. The topic that we are going to cover today is capital punishment. For better understanding, I have divided the topic into different subparts. We are going to cover the introduction, history of capital punishment, arguments for and against capital punishment, the current status and alternatives to capital punishment. Lastly, I will tell you about the Indian scenario of capital punishment. Now, introduction. Capital punishment, also known as the death penalty, is one of the most controversial topics in modern society. It involves the execution of person by the state as a punishment for a crime for that they had committed. The use of capital punishment has been debated for centuries, with arguments both for and against its use. In this presentation, we will explore the history of capital punishment, the arguments for and against its use, the current status of capital punishment in the world, and some alternatives to the form of punishment. By the end of this presentation, you will have a better understanding of the complexities surrounding this contentious issue. Now, history of capital punishment. Capital punishment has been used for various societies throughout history as a means of punishing criminals for their actions. The earliest known records of capital punishment date back to ancient civilization like Babylon, where it was used for crimes like theft and treason. In ancient Greece and Rome, capital punishment was also used for a variety of crimes, including murder, treason, and political dissent. Over time, the use of capital punishment has evolved, with different societies implementing its own form of execution. In medieval Europe, for example, common methods including hanging, beheading, and burning at the stake. In more recent times, some countries have adopted lethal injection as the preferred method for execution. Despite its widespread use throughout society, the practice of practical capital punishment remains controversial. While some argue that it serves as a deterrent to crime and provides justice for victims and their families, others point to the risk of executing innocent people and the possibility of racial and economic disparities in its application. Now, arguments for capital punishment. Capital punishment has a contentious issue for centuries, but there are several arguments in favor of it. One of the main arguments is deterrence, which suggests that the fear of death will prevent people from committing such crimes. Another argument is retribution, which posits that criminals should have punished in proportion to the harm they have caused. Finally, some argue that capital punishment is necessary for justice, as it provides closure for the victims' families and ensures that punishment fits the crime. While these arguments are compelling, some critics argue that they do not outweigh the risk and drawbacks of capital punishment. For example, there is evidence that suggests that death penalty does not deter the crime. Additionally, there is always a risk for executing an innocent person, and the process of capital punishment cannot be reversed. Finally, many argue that the rehabilitation and restorative justice are more effective at reducing crime and promoting healing for victims and communities. Now, the arguments against capital punishment. One of the main arguments against capital punishment is the risk of executing innocent people. Despite having advances in foreign science and technology, there have been cases where individuals have been wrongly convicted and sentenced to death. The possibility of executing an innocent person is a grave injustice, and that cannot be undone. Another argument against capital punishment is the existence of racial and economic disparities in its application. Studies have shown that individuals from minority groups and those who cannot afford adequate legal representation are more likely to receive the death penalty. This raises questions about the fairness and impartiality of the justice system. Finally, opponents of capital punishment argue that rehabilitation is a more effective alternative to execution. Many countries have abolished the death penalty and have implemented programs aimed at rehabilitating offenders and reintegrating them into society. These programs have shown to reduce recidivism rates and improve public safety. Now, the current status of capital punishment. As of 2021, there are 54 countries that still practice capital punishment, while 109 countries have abolished it either in law or in practice. The United States, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam are among the top 5 countries that have the highest number of executions annually. The use of capital punishment has been a controversial topic for decades, with strong arguments on both sides. While some argue that it serves deterrent to crime and provides justice for its victims, some argue that it is ineffective, costly, and violates human rights. As more and more countries have moved towards abolition, the debate over the use of capital punishment continues to be an important issue worldwide. Now, alternatives to capital punishment. Life imprisonment is a viable alternative to capital punishment. It ensures that the offender is removed from society and unable to commit any further crimes, while also allow the possibility of rehabilitation and eventually release. Restorative justice is another alternative that focuses on repairing the harm caused by the crime rather than punishing the offender. This approach involves in bringing together the victim, the offender and community to find a resolution that addresses the needs for all parties involved. Community service is also a form of punishment that requires the offender to perform unpaid work for the benefit of the community. This not only serves as a deterrent but also helps the offender to develop a sense of responsibility and accountability. The Indian scenario is one of the few countries that still retains capital punishment, although its use has declined in recent years. The death penalty has imposed for certain crimes like murder, terrorism, and treason, but only used in very rare cases. There is still an ongoing debate in India whether capital punishment should be abolished altogether. Supporters argue that it is necessary to deter heinous crimes and provide justice for victims, while opponents point to the risk of executing innocent people and potential for racial and economic disparities in its application. Lastly, thank you for watching, and if you learned something new, like the videos and make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss relevant updates. Also, check out our other videos and feel free to comment down any suggestions on how we can improve our content.